Good morning and welcome to the Future of Design Thinking, Mapping the Past to the Present, presented by Design Temple in partnership with Avid Learning. This seminar is the last in the series of talks centered around Design the India Story, an exhibition on design development in the continent. The twin exhibits showcased at the CSMVS and Max Muller trace the high points of India's journey with design through the lens of objects and ideas. The show at CSMVS has concluded, but you can still catch the exhibit online at designtheindiastory.com. For those of you who missed the previous two talks, Space, Style and Self on 5th Jan explore the way the interior design industry, furniture design, and Indian notions of aesthetics have evolved and been shaped from the 1930s up until the present day. It was an enlightening discussion between Professor Abigail McGowan from the University of Vermont and Greg Foster, editor of AD Magazine, India. Design Debate on 7th Jan was a forum in which designers from various fields came together to discuss, debate, and deliberate on matters of design, followed by the launch of Phaidon's SAR, The Essence of Indian Design. Today's seminar will examine 8 intrinsic Indian concepts of practice and design and will be decoded by 5 industry experts. We are honored to have here today Anita Lal, founder and creative director of Good Earth, Bijoy Jain, celebrated architect and founder of Studio Mumbai, Ekta Agarwal, former creative director for IDEO.org New York and graphic designer, Priya Paul, art collector, design aficionado, and chairperson of APJ Surendra Park Hotels, and Sandeep Sangaru, multidisciplinary designer, educator, and entrepreneur. For more about each of them, please refer to the bio sheet that has been handed out. These stalwarts will share their experiences with implementing these 8 concepts with the objective of evaluating their potential in shaping the future of design globally. Convening the session are Divya Thakur, design practitioner and founder of Design Temple, who will elucidate on the 8 pillars of Indian thought, and Sudhir Bhatia, founder and creative director of Brand Studio, who will summarize the discussion and speak about applications of these concepts in the contemporary and future design world. Before we hear from our experts, please welcome Divya.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here, and it's wonderful to see this packed house for design especially. So hopefully this is an idea whose time has come, finally, yes. Well, like all good things that designers do, ideas through time happened entirely by accident. It was not intended to be the kind of show it turned out to be. And while we were researching objects and how India's journey with design has transpired, certain things kept popping out to me in texts, in books, in various papers written by professors at NID. And I was just interested that where was this potentially coming from, and what did it mean? And the more I looked at those concepts, the more awestruck I was, because it revealed to me that ancient India was actually thinking in a very evolved and sophisticated manner, something that a lot of us have perhaps forgotten, don't know of, which is why then we said, let's pick and cull out these ideas. These ideas are therefore not mine. They belong to the country and for everybody who cares to use them. And we pulled them out. What we're going to do today is, of course, you've seen the show hopefully downstairs. I'm just going to pull the 8 ideas up again, just so we know what they are. We've invited a wonderful panel of speakers from different disciplines, which is one of the other things that we're going to constantly keep pushing your way. And convening this is Sudhir Bhatia, who's been really helpful in kind of streamlining this so that it's useful as a takeaway. So that's roughly the format we're looking at. And here we are, attempting to map the past to the present. So ideas through time, please feel free to hashtag us on anything you're thinking or feeling or doing. Our first thought is the idea of knowledge. In the ancient Indian context, knowledge, this is the sophistication of it, knowledge is broken into three aspects. One is Gyan, which is self-sought and self-revealed. It is the highest form of truth, and it is something that we are not going to be dealing with today. The other base aspects of knowledge, and in this case understanding from a design point of view, are Kala and Vidya. Kala is something that is described as something that is absorbed through your senses. And it is an intuitive, art, so to speak. And Vidya is acquired through the cerebral process. So the point we're making is empathy and analytics. They're two aspects of any design thinking today, and they always were understood in this sort of complex way by the ancients, and I'll keep referring to them as ancients because this is spread over many centuries. So the perceived art, as I've put it down in the show downstairs, something that uses perception to create is Kala. And this is the unified concept of art. There was no difference between art and craft and low and high and design and sculpting, and all of it was unified. It was about the senses and perceiving to create. And there are beautiful shlokas that are there downstairs. I hope you had a chance to read them. If you haven't, you can see it after. The next concept we're talking about is again a very Indian concept of Auchitya. Auchitya, the word Uchit and Anuchit, a lot of us must have heard. It means appropriate and inappropriate. Auchitya is not talking about moral appropriateness. This is about universal appropriateness. So in the Indian context, the idea of doing something for its own sake, like art for itself, art for art's sake, or decoration and design, those kind of distinctions did not exist. We created only what absolutely was required. That, therefore, every act of creation was measured against one thing, which is it Auchitya or is it not? If it is universally appropriate, it has every reason to exist. If it is not, then it doesn't. So all through all the processes that we go through today, we're kind of asking you to pitch whatever decision you need to make to create a product, how to skin it, how to design it, what to do with it, to start a new venture. All of it comes to this one core question, to ask yourself, is it universally appropriate? So they're considered creations, and this is the core in the contemporary context. The next wonderful concept that, of course, had me really excited about reading it was the concept of time in the Indian context, again, is cyclical. So we don't have linear time, and this is today and that's tomorrow and yesterday is gone, and it doesn't exist like that. We have something called the Kal Chakra, which has been described beautifully, where when you create, that is your sort of early stage, which is Shrishti. Then you go into Sthiti, which is a steady or still state. And that is followed by dissolution, which is Samriti, which is interesting because today everybody is talking about disruption and how something ends and something upends something and it starts again. The ancients have figured this out a long time back. The natural cycle for anything is to begin, to find a steady state, and to dissolve. It may dissolve to continue another life in itself. It may be improved upon, but it has to come to a point. There is nothing that will just continue in steady state forever and ever. So one must, the point we're making is it's actually interesting to understand that we have always naturally approached everything as cyclical. Here we are presenting the idea of using innovation as a continuous process to say that, okay, we have now innovated and now we have a new brand and we are good and it's done. So the point is that we are never done. We have to constantly keep doing, and it's an endless process, which is nice to know. So we can correct it maybe on the next cycle. Okay, so Sankalan is is the synthesis. Again, this is something that is, I think, unique to this country, because for many years we've had all kinds of influences from the trade route, from the Portuguese, from the Dutch, the British, and there's no such thing that stands apart. It's not like this is that and this is us and this is you, and so there is a natural ability to imbibe and absorb, and therefore we're making a case for a seamless synthesis. And here, obviously, we've applied it to design, and to say that not to look at an object in isolation, but to actually look at the complete picture, create an entire whole experience. Sangrahit is a collaborative, and it's cool, and we're all talking about collaborations today, and the ancients were doing it always. India's followed the evolutionary process of design, which is a process where something is improved and adapted upon over generations and centuries. So, today we may say that, all right, this is a better way to do it, and then tomorrow somebody else, and so on and so forth, for the purpose of its utility, to improve its utility. In that way, we've had like collaborative creations across many centuries. We've also had, because this was multidisciplinary, naturally, a sculptor, a craftsman, everybody was equal. We've always had a natural manner of collaboration. Here we're making a case for the power of cross-functional teams, the power of ideation, which is much more radical when you put different leaders of thought together. That's what you get. So we're really making a case for collaboration, and it is also the reason why we've picked the speakers we have today, because each one comes with a completely different thought process and a completely different discipline, which I think agitates it in a much nicer way. Prakritik, we all know the word Prakriti, hopefully. Aligned to nature. This is something that a lot of people are talking about today. The Indian word for bhumi, earth, bhumi, bhu is the root. The synonym for bhu is kumbhini. Kumbhini is mother womb or mother creator, and this is how the ancients have viewed the earth as a mother creator. Obviously, plundering of its resources was out of question, and there was an absolute need to align with her resources and be mindful of our consumption of them. So we've pulled that out as a question and a point to say that we need to integrate it as an absolute responsibility. So the question is now not to say, oh, let's be sustainable, or let's find some angle of it, or something like that. It's actually to make it an underlying principle for everything that we do, like it must be sustainable and aligned to nature. The last thing that we've brought out, but not the least, is the idea of ahmiyat and what value means. So is value something that is monetary? We think that in the Indian context, it has never been considered so. We believe the exchange between people, between a product and its experience, really is what is making something valuable. And that is in our opinion, is the result of all design, ultimately, is value creation. So that's the last pillar that we'll end with. I think this is just the sequencing of it. So you can kind of start with using knowledge to understand. You have a core at all points where you're questioning something. The ideation process. Sankalan's also part of the ideation process. You go to, and something that enables you, which is a collaborative, which is Sangrahit. And of course, Prakritik, which is our key responsibility as designers towards this earth, towards each of us, in fact, and eventually create value. So that's ahmiyat right there.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share some thoughts, more specifically with the sort of topic that is being discussed, the intent to design, or why we do what we do, and how we do what we do. So very quickly, I'll read out what Divya had given me, but this idea of auchitya, the concept of considering universal appropriateness, which informs every decision in the making of anything, such that it is appropriateness, its need. So what are the factors you consider, or what according to you are examples of universal appropriateness? And then she goes on with the idea of Kal Chakra, the concept of nonlinear time. So what I'm going to present to you is more just a series of images and some text that create the sort of atmosphere of these ideas, more importantly, and sort of provocations of how one can start imagining the kind of quality of what I'm calling space. So I'd like to start with this lore, a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or held by a particular group, typically passed from person to person by word of mouth. The space between the eye and the base of the bill of a bird, or between the eye and nostril of a snake. I particularly like that in this idea of this understanding of space. There's this sort of intuitive quality or a tacit understanding of an environment, and their ability to negotiate or navigate in that space. Lore carries tacit knowledge through past, present, and future. Answers to each time lie in its appropriation. Most importantly, it is intuitive and rational, subjective and objective at the same time, essential to both survival and nourishment of mankind. So I'm presenting this particular slide and I'm putting forward a question of why did the caveman paint? No galleries, no politics, no economy, no audience. Why would someone do that? Which takes me to the next slide. So I'm just leaving you with this question for the moment. So for me, somewhere this idea of connection, what connects us, which I think in that idea of connection itself is this idea of being universal. So just these are dictionary meanings, but it gives you a sort of insight into the possibility of what it means to be in this quality of space. Water, a colorless, transparent, odorless liquid, which forms the seas, lakes, rivers, and rain, and is the basis of the fluids of living organisms. That's part of it is us. Air, the invisible gaseous substance surrounding the earth, a mixture mainly of oxygen and nitrogen. Light, the natural agent that stimulates sight and makes things visible. I think the important part here, or the operative word here, is that it stimulates sight, making things visible, the idea of visible or opening. Anyway, this next slide is just, so I'm going to share some moments that I have experienced and maybe use that as an idea. This is actually a sandstone quarry not so far out from Jodhpur, and it was a particularly odd time of the year. I think it was March, it doesn't really rain. And I remember my craftsman calling me from there saying that, he was looking for some kind of marble dust to make this sort of lime pigment from this pit. And he called me up kind of sheepishly on the phone and said, we have a problem. So I said, what happened? And he said that it's rained, so I cannot identify the marble. I'll have to wait for it to dry. Just that idea of time and the idea of observation. But here again, what I want to share with you is this moment where there's a whole foundation that's being revealed. There's this moment of, in that flood in Rajasthan, this idea of a quarry that's been sort of covered with water, and then they build these little structures which are just structures for shade, for rest, for eating, which are what they work with. So again, another one that for me is important, this idea of state of rest. So here, angle of repose, the angle of maximum slope at which a heap of any loose solid material will remain in place without sliding. So this was taken in the south. Again, for me, the idea of what I'm interested in, and it's purely a personal position, this idea of what does it mean to be material, or what does materiality mean to us? And if I begin to raise the question that if I am air, light, and water, then I am material in itself. A porous, breathing, infinite, boundless being. So for me, I think that's important. That's the idea of how we can understand our place in time, or how we are time itself. So anyway, this particular slide, what I'm showing that is this ramp. It's a condition of what's happening in this country, this economic movement, this juggernaut that has taken place, and that's okay. But here the motorcycle is brought into the living room of the house, and that hence the ramp. But what I like in this particular case is this, not so much the collision, but this idea of coexistence of two different aspects of our understanding of time. You know, if you think about, you know, culturally, our culture, it is, we are fundamentally, our DNA comes from this idea of understanding lunar time, you know, the time cycles of the relationship of the sun and the moon. So there's also this idea of, you know, ebb and flow, this idea of resonance, you know, reverberation. These are sort of, it's all about movement. It's about how we pass from, you know, from this idea of, you know, I don't want to call it negative and positive, but this idea of reverberation, of a sense of movement. Anyway, the slide on the image on the left is a rock from Hampi. It was several years ago, and I took this of only particular interest, these marks that were left on these rocks. So for me, I only discovered that much later, you know, wooden pegs. So I think most of you do know Hampi. It's this, you know, Vijayanagar dynasty civilization, built, I think, 15th century. You know, correct me for my numbers, but I think in that range. But for me, and so it's not really that long ago. This entire place has been constructed with just one material, granite. So when you look at this rock, you know, what seemingly seems as no space, it's all black and dark. That also then returns back to the idea of, you know, the dwellings, Ajanta, Ellora, the caves, you know, again, why did the caveman paint? But what's interesting here is that, you know, the wood, water is poured, you know, they drive these wooden pegs along that line, and then they pour water, the wood expands and splits the rock, you know, a certain economy of means. It's a very simple device. But the understanding of materiality, of the potentiality of what is in front of us, but always in relationship to oneself. You know, for me, the understanding of space, or the idea of space, can only be understood when I use myself as a point of reference. You know, it's only then that I have an understanding of a sense of proportion, distance, time itself. This, I like, this was actually on a journey from Jodhpur, if I'm correct, to Nagaur. We were going for this music festival. Anyway, sort of collect things along the way that sort of piqued my curiosity. So these are sort of pitchforks. They still make them. And for me, what's particularly special about it is the sense of evolution that has occurred, where it is now a pretty much exact device of the hand. It's just merely an extension of the hand. Even the way that it's formed together, you know, the leather that straps it and puts these twigs that are bent, it's sort of tied, again, like the sort of markings on our palm. But so it has this certain quality. Anyway, so I was, you know, buying this from the gentleman here on the right. I call him, you know, the pocket man. And it was quite interesting. So I was, you know, exchanging money with him. And I sort of started asking, I said, how come you're the only one here dressed in a yellow t-shirt, you know? Everybody else, all his colleagues or aunts and, you know, uncles, all there who were also selling this on the highway. So he kind of looks up at me and says, you know, we get this, you know, these companies that come, you know, advertising, they give away t-shirt, something, whatever, glue company, furniture, whatever it might be, that's not important. So anyway, so he said, I get it for free. So yeah, I can't really argue, you know, it's free, it's cotton, it kind of works in the climate, it makes sense. Anyway, as I'm exchanging money with him, he dips his hand into his t-shirt. And I say like, wow, how did you do that? So he kind of looks back up at me. He says, I took it home, my wife cut it up, and stitched this pink satin lining inside. You know, pretty simple. What I would like you to observe in this, and for me why it is of particular interest, is that there's a lack of prejudice that allows what seemingly is a closed space yet again to be opened, because it is not making a judgment or even a view about colliding cultures, if you want to call it that, but the possibility of where they could potentially overlap. And I think for me that's what's interesting, you know, this idea of when we're talking about India. It's, again, I don't want to call it jugaad. It's not about a jugaad, because I think this idea of empathy, the idea of affection. What does it really mean? For me, it's a state of being. It's a state of where we act from. And that's where the design actually, for me, that's where it actually lies. Now, you would find this in everything and in all of us. So this idea of this aspect of, universal appropriateness, and also this idea of, concept of linear time. I'm sharing this with you again. It's just sort of gestures. If I'm using the word gesture. This one is posture, but the word comes from the Latin verb ponere, which means to put or place. To observe this concept implies an implicit understanding of the carriage of the body as a whole, its approach, attitude, or the positioning of the arms and legs in relation to the object which is being manipulated. Very important. So there's a relationship. There are 2 points of contact or 2 points of communication. That is the basis of how we fundamentally establish what we understand as space. So here I'm sort of called, and this was something that I had shown. It's something that I uncovered actually when we were at the Venice Biennale some time ago, doing a project in there where we had got the Italians to do this particular kind of floor. At that time I worked with a lot of I don't want to call them artisans, but just people who did some incredible work. But anyway, sort of provoked this question about this idea of postures that we take, and so maybe this idea of tradition that we're talking about, that potential can be lost temporarily. Again, the idea of loss is only something I said that there cannot be lost. It's only obscured in time. But anyway, coming back. So this idea of postures, where for me what's important is the postures that we take that in some way, talk about time. So what I was saying about the idea of tradition earlier. So there are processes that still exist, materials that still exist. But just in the posture, just that we take, because I had to sit down on the floor for like 2 hours and work. You've all seen that kind of work happening, I think, pretty much in your backyard or back door. So the idea that a process, so it's our inability or ability to reclaim that position, that posture in the process of work. So again, this idea of an empathy in relationship to the body. I'm not just talking about the physical self, but something that's also inside, that is reflected on the outside. But anyway, coming for me, here what's important is the contact of the hands, the legs, but more importantly, the space here in between. It's always the space. If you look at it, the gesture of something being held. So that was the idea of understanding, for me at least, of the postures that we take and define the things that we do or that we make. Sorry. Affection. It is the ability to observe and to identify with another's situation or condition, and to then care for it and protect it in the hope to provide it with what it needs to be itself. Restrain. To hold back from action, especially by force. Manner, from the French manière, substantivized use of the adjective meaning done with one's hands. A notion which reveals a method of execution or way of doing, especially with regards to the outward manifestation of an embodied process. So again, just tying it back to the idea of this, what is the understanding of what the word I want to call it embodied energy, So this idea that we are, if we contain water and light, it's universal, but it's also an embodied energy that is within us. And it's this mutual relationship of a back and forth, an ebb and flow, the movement of time in that quality of these sort of nuances. These are just a few sort of, I would say callings. I've just kind of pulled them out just as a way to, more importantly, construct a sort of qualitative atmospheric space of, what is it or how do we make contact with each other. I'll leave you with this last slide. It's for me very powerful in the way what it suggests.
doing what you're doing. And to the external knowledge, mental recognize तुम्हारी क्या?
It's this idea of state of grace. So it's not so much just in the idea of making, but at every given point, this idea of what is it that we are going to put in, and not worry about what's going to come out, but just this everyday practice of just doing. I leave you with this, and then, we can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Divya, for organizing this wonderful morning, and lovely to be in Bombay with everybody. Well, that was like the big picture and the I guess the emotional thing. I'm going to take you a little more to the mundane, everyday world of design and I guess the creative process. So, and some things happening to the slide, but doesn't matter. So, Divya asked me to talk about Sangrahit and Sankalap. The Sanskrit is bad. So Sangrahit is really about collaboration, and I think in my life, and I'm sure in many others, collaboration is really central to my life. I mean, both in terms of work as well as how I manage my family. And I really like the way that creativity expands as different minds and ideas diverge, coalesce, and create something that is maybe different from the starting point sometimes. And I'm not saying that collaboration is the only way to go, but it's certainly one that has helped me along these past few years. So really, I'm going to show you a few collaborations that we've done at the Park Hotels and in different areas, and kind of giving you a view of what is possible and moving fast. So we've worked, of course, with art and artists. So this particular is a mural with Bisaza, and so from an architectural kind of collaboration using a building. And I think very often we, in India particularly now, buildings don't really look at public art and looking at art in its spaces as much as they should. It's an afterthought very, very often. Graphic design and communication, and this is a range of our magazines that we do. And for me, the graphic design and communication is really central of communicating the brand on one level. And I'll come to that in the second part of the presentation. So this is with Tanya Khosla out of Bangalore. We do calendars, of course, and that's, again, an interesting multi-collaboration, I would say. We use different photographers, but we also have different creative people that are showcased in the monthly images. And very often we find that because they're from the creative fields, they also want to direct the photographer themselves. So that's another level of the collaboration that happens. We have worked on a new brand, and it's called Zone by the Park, and one of the signature elements in it was really creating this auto, which is a real auto, customizing it to each city, and it works as a vending point as well as a selfie point, as well as it can go around the city if we need it to do, and it becomes like a signature element of the hotel. So one of the most interesting collaborations I've been working on, and of course this hotel opened about 5 or 6 years ago, is this our hotel in Hyderabad, which is I wanted to create a modern palace. So I didn't want to do a typical, and none of our hotels are really typical anything. But I wanted to create a modern palace. And just as a palace would go through centuries, and you'd have different designers, and you'd have different moods, and you might have, one room that's reflective of, the queen from somewhere else, and one from the king of one century and another century. That's how I envisaged this hotel. And when I started working on it, which was in about 2008, 2009, I think at that time, Indian design and designers, whether they were product or interiors, were really, I think, coming coming out of the woodwork in one sense, and also I think the level of design had reached a stage where you could put it into an international quality hotel, and there was a kind of a global yet feel to it. I mean, our hotels reflect contemporary India, so we like a bit of that global local stuff too. So this was the design idea, and basically we wanted to work with the brief. My brief was Hyderabad is really the city of the Nizams and the wealth and the jewels of the Nizams, and that's really what I wanted to use as the design idea. We worked with almost, I think, 25 different designers, if not more. This was the exterior, and the architecture was done by SOM from New York. And the patterning is, of course, aluminum composite. There are about 6,200 panels, but all the panels have this kind of a design that's taken from the jewelry facets. So it's a kind of a jali pattern, but it's rooted in the jewel tradition. And that jewel idea and the richness of the jewels went along with this kind of a lighting feature that was done in the lower lobby, done by Preksha Bey, the designer. This was one of Clove's first pieces. It's Jarrah chandelier. So again, not going to the usual Austrian chandelier makers, we decided to do something that is very Indian in Hyderabad. This was a very interesting collaboration, again using craft. Again, I worked with Preksha Bey, and the Kalamkari artist from Kalahasti was Niranjan Jonagada. And I think the process was really important for all three of us to work together, and we had multiple meetings, and our designer went and actually lived in Kalahasti for some time. So the idea was to take Kalahasti, not just do those simple panels around the wall and no one knows what to do with, but actually take it and make those, maybe push the artist a little more to change. There's a little inset which you may be able to see. To really take the patterns and make them not just more refined, but also make them in larger in scale, and to play with that a bit and different themes that were used in Kalamkari. So that was, using 450 meters of fabric, and it took almost a year and a half to make. But it was just wanted to take Kalamkari a little further. Similarly, this was my collaboration with Tholu Bomatala. He's a leather puppet, and leather puppetry as an art form and a performance art form is actually dying out in this country. And if you see those leather puppets that are normally that you see in kind of melas and things like that, they're very multicolored and sometimes quite garish because they don't use the natural dyes. So I worked with him through multiple processes, and basically one day he came and showed me this unfinished one, and of course a little bit of the blacks are touched up, and that was the one that I liked best. And we then worked with him to do different ones. Each of our floors is named after some emerald or ruby or peridot, and so he accentuated that particular color, but just one color. And it was just really stripping down the art form to its basic, the beautiful lines that they are in these leather puppets. This was a commission by to Sudarshan Shetty, who I'm sure all of you know. And Sudarshan had done a beautiful piece with the Taj Mahal, and we just asked him to do that with Charminar. Then we worked with a whole lot of designers to do different suites. And the idea, again, was to get this kind of luxe living, but in a kind of a palatial, modern palace. And this is done by Jean-Francois Lesage. There was another one by Rajiv Saini, which again used precious stones and semi-precious stones in some of the furniture. And we had also have one by Tarun Telyani, which was again had another feel of opulence. I mean, the rest of the hotel is very, very contemporary and quite white, and these kind of suites. So really, I mean, that's the real buzzword, I guess, for most brands now. To create whether you're selling a car or you're selling coffee, everybody wants to do this complete experience. And I think hotels, hotels have been doing this for quite some time, and I think they've been really in the forefront of it, some more than the others. And I think we at the park have been really conscious of the fact for the past almost 30 years that it's not just a product or a piece of furniture that makes the experience. It's actually really layering all those things that go to make a beautiful kind of environment, or something that is unique to the brand. And so when we started looking at reconceptualizing our hotels, we looked at all the aspects, whether it was the color, the taste, the sights, the smells, and layering them and making each of our hotels absolutely different. And you'll see some of the slides going back, and I'm going to just talk generally about some of those things that we do. And so for us, I mean, each hotel has a design story. So it could be music, as in one of our hotels in Goa. It could be the chakras. It could be the elements and the 5 elements. It could be cinema. And that kind of story is woven in through of course, the public spaces, and then, of course, through other things that we use to communicate with people. So that's really I would say, the style and the design and the colors and the whole visual context of the hotels. And with that, the graphics and the communication design. And you'll see on one of the slides, and we have these kind of black and gray Indian patterns, which actually also communicate our Indianness, but they're in a very kind of neutral palette. Art and craft is another component that we use, and some of the examples I've shown you, but it's also, so again, some of that is not collaborative. Sometimes you choose outstanding pieces of art or commission them and put them into spaces so that there's a new relationship between the space and the customer or the viewer, I would say. Food, again, it's new tastes, it's flavors. From a hospitality point of view, you always keep on innovating, and I think the innovation is a constant process. And so, of course, one of the things that we've done earlier last year actually, is look at our, like, say, a room service kind of idea, and why should it be so boring always? And how do we create innovation and do something fun for our room guests? So we created in-house, like, a room picnic. It's called the Park Picnic, and you can choose a whole about, I think, 6 or 7 menus, and it's just a fun and innovative way of delivery, and it's fun. Music is another way that we look at how we do bars and nightlife. We have our own CDs. Dasridun Shah has created a whole set of movies for our customers to browse through and use. So, it's those little things that you add, whether it's the fragrance in the room, and which is for us is a set of oils that we have been doing for, I don't know, 20 years, which you can put in your bath, on your pillow, or take home. So it's just the small things that I think those are the really, really important things, apart from the big picture design that one does. And and as we keep on looking at our brand, and as we keep on re-examine, and as Ekta said, it's a continuous innovation and a continuous process, not just to excite your customers or but it's also to create new things for yourself. And of course, sustainability is another issue, But I think for us, it's beyond the products and beyond the hard stuff, and I think it's now creating anything but ordinary experiences, and I think that's the catch phrase that we now use to do those little things. Like, for example, we realize that customers don't like waiting too long in the lobby, even if they're just one person behind the check-in. So our team came up. This was truly multidisciplinary. Team came up with an idea of doing shots in the lobby. Started off with being alcoholic. Now there's an option, and so people, our customers love it because you're just waiting there. It gives an opportunity for the manager to actually even talk to them, because otherwise everyone's getting impatient about signing in and getting into their room. So it creates a level of engagement which is just makes it a little more out of the ordinary. And we're constantly looking at these things which we can create to excite everyone. So I'm going to leave you with a little video and happy to answer the next one.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Divya, Vidyan, Temple, and Avid. Okay, now I have to keep up to the speakers who spoke before me. I tend to kind of wander around when I start to speak and not stick to the subject that I'm leaving to talk to. I speak very softly and I speak very less, so that's my nature. I'm asked to talk about Prakritik. For me, Prakritik is more about the environment that we live in, the space, and I love to travel and I live with nature and with people who work with materials, with hand. So that's my environment and the space that I work around. And what I'm going to talk about is my story and my discoveries through working with these people. I'm a wanderer and a nomad. I lived out of a suitcase for like last 15 years and I still live like that, moving around places. I'm just trying to figure out if I'm not wandering around. Yeah. What excites me with nature is its simplicity and its being minimal, but when you start working with it's very complex and it has so many layers that holds it together. And it's the same thing when you're working with natural materials, with hands and with artisans. So that's what excites me and keeps me engaging in working with natural materials. And I'm not going to talk about sustainability here, but I'm going to talk about how to sustain the practices that make sustainable sustain. Okay. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Was I? Yeah. So what I tend to do is I try to work with artisans and craftsmen and with natural materials, and that's what keeps me engaged and keep doing what I do, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to take you to two spaces that I work with. One is Kashmir and one is in Tripura, and there are two contrasting places that I engage myself with. I tend to explore a lot. I like to observe and document a lot in the process, so that what I create comes out of it rather than it being me going and trying to intervene directly, trying to say, okay, let's do this and make this happen. So Kashmir, I started to work there in 2004 and I've been going there since then. But when I went there for the first time, I was an outsider, and it took me almost a year to break the ice with the artisans and the craftsmen to work with them. And meanwhile, I was there, I was trying to figure out how do I do and how do I break this ice with the people working. So I tried to kind of explore the place and space to understand what it is all about. Kashmir is very complex in its socially, culturally, politically, and the strong influences it had over the period of time and history. And it's a mix and match of a lot of things. and it's completely full of layers of complexities. So I'll just take you through a few observations that I make when I go there. I try to photo document a lot of spaces around. The architecture, the bridges, everything is made out of natural materials in its natural form by hand, and they're quite evolved, and they've kind of made hundreds of years back, and they're so refined and kind of taken to an extent that nothing else can be done beyond that. And when you go as a designer and want to intervene and try to take the craft to the next level, how do we start off with? Because that's a big challenge, and every time I do that, I kind of spend a lot of time talking to the artisans and trying to understand the material that they work with. Because the carving in wood is very different from the carving in stone and in other materials. So in Kashmir, they start carving using wet wood. They don't work on seasoned wood, which is very hard. So while they're carving, the wood kind of transforms and warps, but over the period of time, while they finish and come to a finished product, the wood has come back to its original shape and retains it. So that's the traditional knowledge that they have, and you cannot just go and try to replicate it overnight. And that practice comes through constant learning, and people start doing it since they're born, or they're around that environment of making things and understand the material a lot better. And they have a lot of other crafts which I keep engaging and trying to document to understand how they make these things. And one of the finest shawls, Pashmina, is made out of a fleece from a goat that is grown on Ladakh, reared by nomads. And it comes to Srinagar, and it's refined. And the yarn that is used to make the shawl is not a twisted fiber, but a simple yarn. And it's very fine. And it's like you cannot just see it with naked eyes. So it's like it's too fragile, and it goes on a loom. You can't hear me?
No, people at the back are complaining.
There's no mic there? Speaker there? Okay. So seeing the Pashmina shawl and the making of the pashm, or the fiber, I want to bring on the first point of it being simplicity, in that what you see in nature. So it's this twisted fiber, and which makes a strand, and we make this beautiful shawl out of it. And it's not as simple as it looks, but it's very complex. It needs fine hands. In the hands needs to feel the material. The second space that I'm going to take you through is Tripura, where simplicity is a way of life. It's very simple, it's very basic, and they live with only one material which is grown around them, that is bamboo. And they transform this bamboo into different objects, houses, bridges, with just simple one tool, which is a knife or a machete. And they create this beautiful, very refined objects with single material. And as you go to different states in Northeast, you find different patterns, different ways, and different species of bamboo used in different applications. So when I went there for the first time, I was asked to go and teach artisans working with bamboo, to train them to understand how design works and how they can engage with designers, architects to create something new. And I was asked to teach them how to read a technical drawing. And this is the first time I had my hands-on experience working with artisans, because I was trained as an industrial designer in furniture, and my background is more industrial way of looking at things or producing things. And this was my first kind of hands-on, trying to understand how people make things with hand, with a material, with one single tool, without no drawings, and just keep building them. And the applications are quite wonderful and very refined. So here I went to teach these artisans, and they came in all age groups from different states. There were girls, there were women, there were men, there were old people. And I had to communicate them with a language which is universal. So it's drawing. It's you draw and show them what needs to be done and how it's to be done. And while I was doing that, I was learning more than they were learning from me, because that's what happened to me. Because when I saw all the things that they were making there, they were so evolved and so refined. And for me also to introduce something new or come up with a new design was a challenge, because there was nothing else that, again, you can do beyond what's already been done, that's been developed over hundreds of years. So my first chair looks like another regular chair. But I started to kind of explore more and understand how bamboo behaves works. So I wanted to replicate a stool that I had already designed and get back with me, so that I have some memories of that space. And I never thought that I'll go back and work again in bamboo. So it was quite difficult to work with. Everything was so resolved and done already that you don't think you need to intervene any more in that space. So while I was making this tool, I made this triangular seat, which became like the inspiration for me to carry it forward. So I came back with that little triangle space. And that's when I realized crafting a good product is about using minimal things, minimal tools, minimal manipulations. Like how Bijoy showed the stone, where you put a wooden peg and it crack opens the whole stone, which is like quite brilliant. So I took this triangle, and it has this properties of strength, irrespective of how much weight you put on it. It could take tons of loads of weight, but it would only weigh 200 grams. This little stool, the weight of stool is, I think, not more than the weight of this water bottle. So, but you can sit on it. And I was quite excited with this technique of using bamboo, and I wanted to take it further down. So I came back. I got to work with an artisan who still works with me for the last 15 years. And he's my master craftsman. And tried to build the concept of the triangle into a series of functional objects and furniture. Again, trying to work with the same set of tools. So it took me a while. It took me almost like 7-8 years to figure out the whole system and how it works and how it can be produced to a level that it can be taken into the market. A lot of prototyping, testing, and while I was working with the artisans who have been working with bamboo for so long, they always say, sir, ये तो टूट जाएगा, ये तो खत्म हो जाएगा, ये तो इतना पतला है, हमने कभी ऐसा नहीं बनाया था. So that would be the kind of input that I get from them while working with them. So I said, no, let's try and figure out a solution. Maybe it'll work or may not. Let's see. So we would just make these prototypes, sit on them, and test them out. And yeah, he was one of the persons who Brajendra. So we do variations, we change the drawings on site, trying to figure out solutions. And again, since they were all new objects, and I had given them only drawings, and they were making only components for for 2 weeks, and they didn't know how the final object is going to look like when it's done. And once they started putting it together, they got excited and kind of trying to test them out and figure out. But these were the first set of prototypes, and when I started this as a project, the people who commissioned me to do this project didn't believe in the idea of these products, and they were like, it was stalled and was kind of put away. This doesn't have any potential, it's too much work, and it takes a lot of time, and it's going to be very expensive and not going to work. So then that was the point when I thought I should start working it and producing it myself. And I started this workshop to produce them, and I just jumped out of the blue into creating this big thing, which after a while I thought I'll shut it down, because it was just not sustainable to keep doing things, because I had to pump in a lot of money. I had to get artisans, employ them full time, develop each product, and I could only sell my first product after 3 years of constantly developing it. So it kind of takes a while, because we talk about sustainability, but we don't have the system around it to support it. If I want to buy a species of bamboo from the market, it's not available. treated or kind of as a piece. Like you can go to market and buy wood, but not bamboo to what specification you need. So with my workshop, I'm involved right from the harvesting, working with the guy who cultivates bamboo in the Northeast. I go there, select the bamboo to be cut. It's treated and everything is done in-house. So it took me a while to figure out the whole system and put it in place so that we can sell our first product. And it took me almost 3 to 4 years to do that. And it needs a lot of time and investment and working constantly with people who are there and trying to make them understand that what I'm trying to do is not to make a business out of it, but trying to take the craft to the next level and to sustain the younger generation of artisans to keep practicing the craft rather than moving away from villages to the cities and doing mere jobs. So working with natural materials comes with a lot of challenges because it's just not there for us to access very easily. That's why everything that comes out of natural materials are very expensive to deal with initially. But I guess hopefully people will start putting them together and there will be a whole system of products that come through. So we managed to kind of produce batches where they look exactly like they've been machine made with consistency. And a lot of my time goes into designing the process rather than designing the product. The product takes me a day to do, but it takes me weeks and months to figure out a whole system that the product that comes out comes with certain quality, consistency, and design. So these are some products that I'll just quickly run through. But I'm going to show you. This product was recently auctioned at the Christie's. So it traveled a long way down in the last 12 years. It's a product for kids. So a lot of engineering goes, a lot of industrial design goes into making a crafted product. So I'll just quickly run through this, how we make this chair. It looks very simple and looks, okay, why this chair costs 30,000. Yeah, so this is how it's made. A whole bamboo is taken, which you see on the right of the left image. It's split between two nodes, and the distance between the two nodes have to be the same for that particular chair. So there's a lot of selection that goes into selecting the particular pole of bamboo because all bamboo poles are different. And similarly, there are different components that come together and put together, glued, laminated. And in the process, you're also designing the process of how to clamp them, jig them. So we also design a lot of tools to make it easier and faster to work. So we have also developed a lot of finishing and things. And this is a hotel in Beijing. It's called the Temple Hotel. It's a boutique hotel, yeah. And the owner is a very close friend now, and he gets me orders from the guests who stay there who want to buy the furniture. Last time it was Tim Cook who was staying in that place. Yeah, so this one of those, it's a Buddhist temple, and the monk quarters have been converted into guest rooms. There are only 8 rooms, and it's bang in the center of Beijing, behind the Forbidden City. Yeah. So craft and materials and good design. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I first want to say that I'm so impressed and so happy that Divya has picked up a theme which is relevant, and now I think the time has come in India for us to start looking at our own history, our own culture, our itihas, and to then create our own view of the world, our own designs, from the prism of our own, let's say, culture. And she gave me very wisely this topic of ahmiyat. And ahmiyat is exactly what is something that we've been working, or which we've been trying to do in our, in the way we've created this brand called Good Earth. I can't read, yeah. But I want to actually first start with a slightly larger question, or a little thought. The thought is that the core of our unconscious carries collective memories. And this is what is common to all of us as humans. The concept of universal archetypes that Carl Jung had articulated. What are universal archetypes? These are the patterns of human behavior that are hardwired in our souls. Archetypes are the perennial themes that represent our collective yearning, our imagination, and the deepest desires that we carry. They can be divine or diabolical. It can be the sinner, the saint. It can be the explorer, the conqueror, the hero, the loving mother, the wise sage, the destructive rebel, and so on. We are surrounded by archetypes in the recurrent symbols found every day in art, literature, movies, soap operas, and of course in mythology. Within the Indian subcontinent, the earliest attributes of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Ganesh, Shakti, these are all like seeds within us. And these attributes are what unconsciously set the stage for the formation of our own persona, where we adopt unconsciously one or more attributes of our loved deity. So we carry this ancestral racial memory that comes down through hundreds of generations and forms the core of our beliefs. It is actually especially important in our context because in India we belong to a civilization which is not amongst the oldest, but which is actually the oldest unbroken living civilization. And that is a very precious thing that we carry within ourselves. For example, Vedic chants from the Rig Veda from over 3,000 years ago are still chanted daily in temples. The Vishwanath temple in Benares is an example of this tradition of chanting through just sounds. And these sounds have come down through the oral tradition from the time of Rig Veda. Other ancient traditions extend to many cultural aspects such as textile weaving, natural dye printing, also the making of clay vessels, folk iconography, where so many designs are made today just as they were made thousands of years ago and using similar tools. And illustrating this aspect of inheriting ancient tradition is our own belief of many lives that we all carry. We believe that we have many lives, not just this one lifetime. We believe in karma, we believe in horoscopes. And most of us continue to have these beliefs even though we live very modern lifestyles. Although ours is an unbroken, continuous culture, it has nevertheless been constantly evolving, assimilating influences from across Asia and parts of Europe through interaction along the Silk Route and invasions that started with the Greeks from the time of Alexander 2,500 years ago. This eclectic culture is the common itihas that binds us as a people, and it is in this connect and context that I would like to explore ahmiyat and what it means to all of us at Good Earth. Starting 21 years ago to the date, which is today, we opened Good Earth on the 21st of Jan 1996 in Kemp's Corner, Mumbai. And my first impulse was simply and just to create beautiful things for everyday living. Soon, however, I realized that what we needed was to articulate a design philosophy to guide us. And over time, we had many discussions internally and with friends whose opinions we valued. what we came to understand was the importance of creating products for a lifestyle that is relevant in the Indian context. And for us, this is ahmiyat. We started thinking about the world around us, and we saw that color was what defined it. Colorful saris, turbans, colorful flowers, colorful spices, and yet Indian homes in the mid-90s had forsaken color. And we had bland crockery, and beige and brown were the most popular shades in Indian homes. I suppose some of it was the residual influence of the English and their love of pastels. And also there was a new universal trend of neutral tones with Scandinavian aesthetics being seen as in. The point was that what works in the cold light of Scandinavia and England does not have ahmiyat in an Indian home. So how do we add ahmiyat to our designs was the next question. Our natural impulse was love of nature, and as our very name implies. And one Weber we found was an important concept in Indian tradition. It means the splendor of the forest. There are innumerable shlokas celebrating the splendor of the sun, the moon, the stars, birds, animals, and the forest. We humans are a part of this splendor, and we are lost when we move away from it. Almost all our designs are based on bringing some element of nature into our lives, be it an actual form of birds, trees, flowers, or just the colors of nature, vibrant, earthy, or the scents and oils of real flowers, real resins, and grasses from the earth. We stay very close to nature in Good Earth. And in India, we understand color by how it appears in nature. So we say dhani, jamun, neel, falsa, asmani, geru, pyazi, gulabi, and so on. And that's how we define them when we also write which color it is. Apart from relevance, another aspect of ahmiyat is value. At Good Earth, we consciously stay away from the Western style of consumption, of buying and selling huge quantities of items that are inexpensive and can easily be discarded and replaced next season. Whether in our clothes or in our home, our endeavor is to create products that elevate the experience of owning it. The quality of design has to be thoughtful and products mindfully made, rejecting the idea of fads and what is in fashion or out. The essence of culture is that it is both timeless and of the moment. That is why designs that resonate most are those that are timeless and current at the same time, and I think importantly, when they evoke some positive emotion. This brings up a very important aspect of Indian aesthetics, and that is the concept of rasa. In Sanskrit, rasa literally means the essence within the work of art that evokes a sublime emotion in the receiver. This feeling cannot be described, exists only if the work is capable of evoking it. But without the bhav of rasa, a work is sterile and it is mechanical. So we see value in creating designs that say something to the owner and enhance some aspect of living. Designs that can be accumulated and that sit well with each other and continue to be enjoyed over a long period of time. When you live with something over time and get attached to it, it has an emotional connect. And that is where its value lies, in enhancing your experience of owning it, of using it. Culture is cumulative with layers added over centuries, and we at Good Earth see ourselves as a part of a continuum, just adding something to what has gone before us and making it relevant in the contemporary context. Thank you.
Hi. So it's, can you hear me in the back? Yep, it's okay. All right, quite a full room. We were expecting about 75 people, and I don't know, this looks like more like 150. It's amazing.
We were 200.
We're 200, wow. So fantastic. Thank you for coming. This is just incredible, and it just tells us that all of you are interested in the subject of design, not just design for aesthetics, but what I see design thinking, and it can be applied everywhere. And I'll kind of dig into that and try to, at the end, summarize some of the thoughts that we've heard. But there was a lot of interesting things that were shared today. It's going to be impossible to cover it all. But I'll take you through some case studies and then a little bit of my experience, and then we'll kind of wrap up pulling Divya's concepts that she's pulled together, and where design thinking is today in the contemporary space. So I want to start with this case study called Bright Spots. And Bright Spots was written by two professors at Stanford, Chip and Dan Heath, and you can kind of get the book. It's called Switch. It's a fantastic book. I'd recommend all of you read it. The case is in 1990, Vietnam. 65% of the kids in Vietnam are suffering, below the age of 5, are suffering from malnutrition. And the conventional wisdom is that they have poor sanitation, poverty, lack of clean water, ignorance. I mean, everything that the government kind of knew. Nothing, but very complex to solve, right? Not easy problems to solve. So then here comes this guy named Jerry Sternin, and Jerry Sternin's coming from Save the Children. He's an American. He lands into Vietnam. That's Jerry Sternin on the top right, in the top image. His son was 10 at the time, so this picture was taken a lot later. Jerry Sternin comes in to Vietnam. He lands in, and they give him a 6-month visa. Now, if you're going to try to solve a nutrition problem, as you heard Ekta tell us, she was, I think, on the field for about a year. It's almost impossible to solve a nutrition problem in 6 months, right? And he didn't have the experience. He wasn't a nutritionist, right? And he had a lack of funds, and he had a really small team. I think most startups out here, anybody who's here is running a startup probably has the same condition, same set of conditions. But his instinct, he had an instinct, and the instinct said that the solution will lie in the community. And so what did he do? He took his field workers and he sent them out into the villages, and they went and measured the weight and height of a lot of kids in many of the houses. And they came back and they looked at the data, and he said, wow, some of the houses have children with the right weight for that height. So something is going on that is right in those homes. So he didn't focus on the malnutrition problem. He did not go and look at malnutrition. He actually went and looked at the healthy kids, and that's what's called the bright spots. They went into some of these bright spot homes, and they saw what the bright spot moms were doing. They were feeding the kids 4 meals a day, 4 small meals a day, actively feeding them, and giving them a whole variety of foods. They were giving them shrimp and crab. You know, they were farmers, so when they were on the fields, they would pick up the shrimp and crab off the fields, put them in their pocket, take it home, throw them into the rice, throw them into the cooking. And sweet potato greens, basically most people thought the sweet potato greens were not nutritious. They were kind of the poor man's food. It would just be thrown aside. You'd only eat the sweet potato. These mothers were using the sweet potato greens. The shrimp and the crab were only meant for adults, and the kids were not given that. But these bright spot moms were giving their kids the shrimp and the crab. Whereas in the conventional home, you were getting 2 meals a day, soft foods, and high quality rice. So you think, you know, this is good nutritious food for you. Well, quite not quite. So the hypothesis that he walked away with was that, you know, if some kids can be healthy at all odds, then why can't all the kids be healthy? And the insight he walked away with also was that the mothers did not need motivation. I mean, I have 2 kids, and I'm totally motivated, and my wife, we're both totally motivated to make sure our kids are healthy. No parent is not motivated to make their kids healthy. But what they were missing was direction. And so it would have been very easy for him to put a little flyer together and put a recipe of what these Bright Spot moms were doing and give it to every household and walk away anyway. The Vietnamese government didn't want him there. They wanted him out. And the reason being because the US had an embargo on Vietnam at the time, so they really didn't want another American walking around Vietnam, right? He could be a spy, he could be anything. So he could have done that, but he did not. He did not do that. He instead held cooking classes. And he took a Bright Spot mom, and he brought in about 10 other mothers from the village, and they held cooking classes. And he required that the mothers that came to the Bright Spot mom home brought the ingredients. They went into the fields and collected the crab. They went and brought the sweet potato greens. And what that gave them was hope. Basically, they realized that the solution was local and that it was affordable. Fantastic. I mean, we can do it. And then the catalyst really for the change was that they experienced the cooking. They went through the cooking process, and that was what catalyzed change. And change is very difficult in this. To change human behavior is almost impossible. In 6 months, they saw 65% of an uptick in the nutrition, right, in the kids. And today, many years later, a group from a university in the US went to Vietnam to see how the program was doing, and it had influenced 2.2 million people. So it was really quite fantastic. So what do we take away from that? Is that you don't just analyze, think, and design. You see, feel, and design. And I think that's the essence of what we're all trying to do with design thinking. We want to see and feel, because when we see and feel, we can change a lot of things. We can really solve some really wicked problems out there, right? So I want to kind of jump to another case study where repeating a successful formula versus using a cyclical process of reinvention and testing. And we'll look at these two companies to see how they kind of pan out over time. So it's 1884, 5 brothers get together, and they form this circus called the Ringling Brothers. Fantastic, probably very innovative at the time. You know, by the 1930s, they were the largest circus performance act in the world, probably doing extremely well. You know, they had the elephants, they had the clowns, they had the tigers. And let's just look at 2015, what they were doing. Reliable design. So they stayed over 146 years repeating the same formula. Incredible. And it probably worked. It probably worked for a long time. So let's look at the second example. In 1984, from Canada, this high school dropout came along. His name was Guy Lilliberté. And he came together with a bunch of other circus performers. They were young, they were 20-year-olds. And they created a completely new format of this circus performance. They had no research, no data to really follow on and rely on. No market data. Basically, they said, we're going to make a performance like a circus with no animals, acrobats only, contortionists, single-themed show, and high design, and they're going to be a high ticket price. And the new model really took art and comedy and drama and brought it all together, and there was born this company called Cirque du Soleil. And in 10 years, as they they started in 84, so within this first 6 to 10 years, they had a formula, and they figured it out. and they knew what was going to work. They went through the cycle of reinventing, fine-tuning, prototyping. And you've heard these words again and again by all the speakers that went by before me. And I hope you'll just keep those words in your mind, because that's what it's all about. And but the key is they kept reinventing themselves. They kept reinventing themselves. And now let's just look at something they're doing today. And that's what I call validated design. They basically validated their concepts. They couldn't always say that this was going to be successful. It was just valid. It was not reliable. So let's look at that. What does that mean? Let's look at it in these two bell graphs, okay, these bell curves. And on the left side, you have reliability, and on the right side, you have validity. Okay, most companies, and I work with quite a few of them, and that live on the left side. They're CEOs, and this is kind of more towards the executives of the company, because good design doesn't just come from having a good design department. Good design comes because you know the people at the top of the company understand how to balance reliability versus validity. Okay, if you're innovating, you can never have a formula, an algorithm won't exist. You're going to have to take the risk. And the CEO of the company has to be willing to take that risk, okay? And therefore, he has to understand the value of validity. He has to actually protect validity and reward it. If at the top management level this is not happening, probably the company will never succeed in the long run. Today, Cirque du Soleil in January announced that they were closing after 147 years. They are now finally closing their doors. And on the other hand, Cirque du Soleil, Ringling Brothers is closing, I'm sorry. And Cirque du Soleil is valued at 1.5 billion and is just growing and growing every day. They spend, Guy Lilliberté spent most of his time protecting validity. He did not rely on just following that reliable formula. Even after 10 years, when they figured out the formula, they changed it again, and they kept innovating and kept innovating. And I think for the management, it's really important to take that home and to understand and find the balance between the two. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about one of the enablers of good design, and maybe a little bit through my own experience. And so when I started as a professional in '93 in the US, I was there for a long time. And when I started as a designer there, this is kind of how I saw design. It was very silo-driven. I worked in the tech industry, and marketing would have an idea, and they'd send it over to the engineering department. Engineering would kind of evaluate it and say, yeah, we can do it. And then they'd literally just pop it over to design, and we'd make a skin, and we'd give it back to engineering. And then what came out, and a lot of features were changed, and engineering did what they wanted, and engineering really held the trump card. Because if engineering told me I can't do it, we can't do it, and designers were just like, fine, you can't do it. So it's very tactical. We had limited value in the development process. But it had its place at the time, and it was successful. Let's look at a really successful product that came out of something like that. This is a chair that was designed by a Danish designer named Hans Wagner, and it's a beautiful chair. I've sat on it many times. It's ergonomically perfect. Its form and function. The manufacturing process is incredible. And it's called the chair. I mean, which chair is called the chair? Only the best chair in the world is called the chair, right? The American presidents used to sit on this chair. And so it did really well for its time. But I think today we have a lot of wicked problems that we need to solve. And we need to collaborate. So design to me today is this. This is what I do in my job today. And I try to bring companies together. We try to bring the context and design. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about going out and getting empathetic. Because the empathy, I'll tell you, the empathy is the firepower that a designer has when they go into a room with an engineer or with head of marketing. The only thing that will save us is empathy. If we have empathy, we have the tools to navigate very complex and difficult battles that happen inside corporate rooms and boardrooms, etc., to get innovation. Because I tell you, if you're a designer and you're not willing to have the battle, then forget it. You'll never really create innovation. You have to be able to have the battle. And the only way to really have the battle is to have empathy. And I've been in many situations where it's the empathy that saved us. Because if I didn't have that empathy, I wouldn't be able to fight the fight, right? So coming together, working collaboratively, cross-functionally, leads to radical ideas and innovative ideas. And really leads to success. Initially, I used to put I in the middle, which was innovation, and I've stopped putting I in the middle because it's really about success. It's not about just making an innovative product. At the end, it has to be successful. It has to be appropriate. We need to make appropriate products. And design whole experiences. And I find whole experiences comes into what I've seen lately is in service design, where you really look at the end-to-end service and you design all the elements of the service. And as you'd seen with Priya Paul looking at the hospitality space, where they have to look at the whole service, they end up probably being the best people to probably take hospitality and banking and work with the banking company and bring them together and make a fantastic scalable banking solution like Ekta was talking about earlier. But how do you measure success? What is the framework that we should work with in the future? Is success just measured with economy? Is that how we should work? And I think the triple bottom line is really what most companies should start thinking about. And the future is going to be this. We are not only going to measure success by economy, because if we do, we will not have a place or an earth to live on. This is a photograph I took as part of a project we're doing in Karnataka with the farmers to help them drive sustainable practices on their farms. And this is horrifying, that they're sucking the blood out of the land. And you can see that 3 farmers are standing there in the background and figuring out how to even take the last few drops out, right? We as designers have to work, and really the leaders of the company need to think about this. I think the leaders of the company are also designers. They shouldn't just think that their job is about finding the market and growing the company. Right? They should be concerned about design, and they should be concerned about measurement. We need to think about how we measure things. So it's economy, social, and environment. So the triple bottom line measures 3 things, and you got to just figure out how you want to measure it and how you're going to execute that. So it's we're a little bit over time, so we're going to kind of now just try to wrap up. And this is how I see design thinking. This is a graphic that's taken from the D School at Stanford. And it kind of is really well done. It represents what design thinking is. You gain empathy, you define a problem, you go and ideate, you prototype, and then you test. And this is just a constant cyclical process. And it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going till one day you have the right product in your hand, the appropriate product. And as Divya put these words, and she called me a couple of weeks ago. Asad called me from Avid Learning, and we got together and we sat down and said, okay, how do we merge the two? So this is more of Divya's side. I live on the top, and then here she brought me in and said, okay, how do we match these and figure out, and we sat together for quite a few days and try to see if there was a match and how to match it. So this is one framework, okay? We hope you can take it and do something with it. Auchitya, which is appropriateness, is everywhere. As designers, when we step in and we take a problem, we need to make appropriate solutions, and that's how we start. And then we come with this whole framework of different concepts, right? Whether you're building empathy or you're doing analytics, I'm not saying don't do analysis. You must do analysis. Analysis is important, but just don't forget to have empathy, to see and feel. Right? If the Carl is part of the cyclical process, so much of design is just about cycling through and creating concepts and small concepts. And there's this value in the 30-second prototype. You should create the 30-second. You should all go home, any designer here, go home today and try to create the 30-second prototype, because there's value in that 30-second prototype. And then create the one-day prototype and the two-day prototype. But do not create the 6-month prototype, because in 6 months you spent too much time and you've invested too much to learn that maybe it doesn't work, and that's too late. You'd have too much invested, you won't be able to throw it away. Okay, so create prototypes constantly, cyclical, and design whole experiences. Think of service design. If you are not thinking of service design, take that, just write that word down, those words down. Go home, read about service design, and see what the frameworks of creating service design. You can actually map out your full service, and you should be mapping out your full service and looking at it, because otherwise it's all talk. I'm telling you, we're all talking to each other, we sit in meetings and we all talk, but if you map out the whole service, literally on large charts, big 6-foot map like this, and you'll see your entire service unfold, and it's unbelievable. And where you'll start like using that as a prototype. It's a graph, it's a chart, but it's a prototype. And to the enabler, right? The cross-functional team. Today, I work in the tech industry today. I can't do everything. My team, some of my teammates come from IIT, and some of them come from JJ School of Art, and we sit together in our studio, and it's fantastic, because the IIT kids bring like this whole different way of thinking and depth of technology, and my art student is just so skilled. His skill levels are unreal, and I'm just blown away by some of these art students that come out of JJ School. And there must be others. I mean, this is just my experience. I'm sure there are a lot of students here, and I'm sure a lot of you are doing fantastic work. But remember to work in cross-functional teams. You cannot do it all together and all alone if you want to really solve wicked problems. And like I said, the triple bottom line, it's just so important that we take our environment and our society into consideration, and we don't just take economy. And this is really up to the CEOs and the owners of the companies to value that. And so what comes out of that, what comes out of all of this is value. And we create value, right? Ahmiyat. We create value. And what is value? Value is the exchange when you use a product. That is value. It's that exchange. It's the when you actually use a product, it's that exchange that takes place. There's no value in a train seat going empty, right? There's value if the seat is full, it's being used. Now there's value, right? There's no value in a hotel room going empty. It's only valuable when it's being used. So it's the use, it's the usage, and that exchange of use that is value. And how do we measure it? We have to think about. Everybody's problems will be different, and you got to think about how to measure. Measurement is a part of it. So I kind of want to end with this statement by Buckminster Fuller, and he says, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead a new way of thinking. So what we've given you, I hope, with this seminar today is a tool, a set of tools. And I'll tell you, these tools keep changing. These tools don't stay the same, but the basic concept, the basic structure is the same. Build empathy for humans. How you build the empathy will keep changing, as you saw in some of Ekta's work, right? I thought it was fantastic how she talked about understanding sexual behavior, right? And instead creating this salon where girls would come and do their nails, make them comfortable, set up an environment that is comfortable, so that then you can actually talk to them about their sexual behavior. That itself is, that whole process, they spent probably days and days and days and practicing it and trying it and designing it, right? And the designers did it, right? Not just a bunch of researchers. And I'll tell you why it's important that the designers go out in the field. And if you have companies where you have designers, send them on the field so they become empathetic, because they then believe and they can convert that empathy into real solution. So today we're giving you these tools, and you just take them and apply them the best way you can, right? Thank you.
You've been a fab audience, and it's getting time for lunch, and everyone must be hungry. But we just wanted to open it up in case there are questions. We'll keep it short so we don't take up too much of your time. There's someone right there. I think how many? 2, 3 questions? Whoever. Yeah, everyone's waited up. You have a question? Yeah.
You see, when I heard the word empathy, and I saw how the workers were carrying bricks. I'm a disabled person, and I found that coming here was a problem for me. I'm wheelchair. I'm affected by polio, but there was no railing on the staircase, and nobody talked about user-friendly. Even the hotel. You know, disability, I nowadays get wheelchair if I go. But some hotels are disabled friendly and the others are not. Designing should incorporate this element. And even green issues. Yes.
I think it's important not to qualify it so precisely in terms of objectifying what is considered to be disabled. I understand that there's a physical obstruction that is there. I think in this, and I'm using the context of where we're living in right now, I mean, as we are, and the relationships that we share, that I think is important too, because it's also very extremely nuclear idea about this idea of, I'm not saying that handrails should not exist. I'm not saying that none of the things that you've talked about should not be present in our society or culture. But I think the idea of an interrelationship that can facilitate the movement of what we are calling disabled, and it's my action in relationship to you. I think that opportunity for us exists out here, and to take actually strength in that idea of what is that interrelationship. That's what our culture, that's how I understand we are civilized. And the meaning of what it means to be civilized, or what it means to nurture a civilization. So this idea that we continuously hammer at, in the idea of design being, it has to be finally made into an object, where the object itself, we are acting in that action of creativity. So it's not just, I understand what you're saying, that these are devices that are required so that one can negotiate in an idea of being self-reliant, right? So self-reliance is also an operative word. But I think for me, that's not where my interest lies. I think it's more in the quality of how that possibility of exchange can occur. Because at any given point, if you think, that's why I asked the question, why did the caveman paint? That's a question I'm putting back out to the crowd. Why? Pure ethos, pure ethic, transcending time. His empathy is what we experience right now. That was the first action taken. That's why I said there was no agenda, but just to express what I'm surrounded by. And I think that's what's important. Once we are able to negotiate that between each other, I think that's what's important. So I've not answered your question of this idea of disability, but disabled is only, I think, a view of a state of being where, so if I take the rock, for example, it's a black space, and you can say this, nothing here. But it's not that. It's, how you actually disable and open up. I think that's what's, for me, of more interest. Sorry, I hopped the...
Thank you, Vijay. Anyone else?
Thank you, everybody. It was really a wonderful presentation by all of you. Really grateful for the subject itself. I am basically into environment and into climate change, and I do a lot of education with children with regards to, and a lot of you touched upon environment, especially the last summing up that you especially mentioned about environment, social, and the way you have to look at it, and that picture that you showed. So I just wanted to know, and also the Hyderabad presentation that you showed about Park Hotel. How far is this sustainability being incorporated into designs now, especially considering the 5-star culture and the hotels that are coming up? To what extent are the solar, energy aspects being incorporated in design now, or even the recycling bit? I suppose Orchid in Bombay is doing that to some extent. And also, the kind of ecotourism that's happening and the design where a lot of things like bamboos and all are being used. But how far is the actual sustainability being looked at? And of course, the Syria example was excellent. The way you have looked at it.
Can I take that? Well, actually, be happy to know that the Park Hyderabad was India's first LEED certified gold hotel building. So we actually embedded sustainability quite a bit straight from the construction process. I think since then, India's come a long way. There are many hotels that build that into their construction. A lot of them do it as an energy audit and things like that. So there's a lot of sustainability that is happening in the hotel world. Hotels are almost like mini cities in their own selves in terms of having very stringent requirements, not now, but like for the past 20 years as far as pollution, water, and effluents and things like that go. So they are more interesting environments and cleaner environments, and sometimes our cities. So I think there is a movement. It's not as if there are many states which mandate green water harvesting, solar panels, things like that. So it does depend state to state, but there is a kind of a movement for that.
I just want to say something before we jump off the sustainability. So that project, that picture I showed you, we're basically doing a project for a sugar mill. And the owner of the company is interested in driving sustainable practices inside with his farmers. So at the top down, there's good intention, right? Which is great. We need that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing the project. But within the organization, they're totally run in silos. And I find that in a lot of the companies in India, and maybe even in the West, that these silos, the problem with sustainability, it requires many disciplines to come together. And it's a full service. It's not just one solution. And I find the biggest problem to really achieve this, one of the big problems of achieving sustainability is good cross-functional teamwork. Because it's complex. Sustainability is not so easy. And without that teamwork, we're not going to achieve it. So if there are HR people in this room, please work on building good teams, because that is what we need. We need to bring teams together that will solve it from all different disciplines.
Okay.
Okay, very good afternoon to everybody, and a lovely presentation. One thing I want to ask is that how does a designer or a design company influence governments to have good infrastructures for their people? Since you have kept on insisting on we having empathy towards the people of a nation or a people of a state or whatever, but then how does a government actually, make it a reality? Because today, if you just walk out of this building, you don't see many places where it's very helpful for a person to, say, visit the Louvre, for example. Now in this country, okay, forget the country, this city, okay, where people have to literally look and in desperation, do sort of, stupid things. So then how does a design company, actually then help out the government to do something? So this is what I want to know.
I'm going to answer some part of it, and maybe if we have a difference of opinion, we can always add in. I think I've been practicing for about 20 years now, and I just realized that I don't think I should wait and try and convince someone else to do something, and I have to do what I can do within my power as much as I can. And this whole exhibit has come about from we're a really tiny studio, but we got the Godreges involved and they supported us, and we got Asian Paints and they supported us collaboratively. And so the change is really each one of us. I don't think that in this country, which has so many other problems, we can now, I don't even think that we should wait, that now the government must do something. Each one of us should try and do what we can do, and I think that with just the cumulative effect of only that, maybe just the number of people in this room is actually quite commendable. It will make a difference. It 100% will. And one thing we've learned, I think you were talking about scale. This is the first time that a design exhibition was shown at the Prince of Wales, at the CSMVS, and the kind of numbers of people that we got and the way they were engaging with design, I never thought people were interested. I always thought people don't care, they don't care about the details. But we've had children come up and their parents, and they're explaining to them. It's really been heartening. So I think each one of us needs to just chip in and do what we can.
Yeah, that's true. And this is definitely a good first step. So actually, two things in response to yours and maybe to the lady before. I mean, we have things like the National Building Code, which mandates things like services for disabled ramps, this and that. How many buildings do you know comply with that in India or in your city? So I think that's the question you have to ask as a citizen, and maybe demand those services from those buildings or from your local cooperators. I think there's been a serious lack of urban planning in India. And because of our cities, booming and mushrooming, and the lack of civic good behavior as well as civic services as an issue there. I know that that for the Smart Cities project, I think the government has, there's 100 cities that are doing. There's a lot of design thinking going into building those cities, and that's leave it to Bijoy to have. We have a question. But
Quick.
You want to add?
Yeah. Okay, let's get the question.
No, I thought you wanted to add something.
No, that's okay. I'll add on to this question then.
You know what the question is? Okay, please.
Hi, this is Rishi Raj from Orad. Sorry for the sore throat. Lovely presentation. I just want to throw up a thought for debate and to ponder on even later. I represent the fine art community, and for the longest period, we feel this sort of dichotomy for all the craftsmen and the artisans. I think they're in a crossroad. If they try to be original and to create something, they compromise their short-term sustainability. But the fine art community gets back and says, you're not an artist, you're not qualified, you are a regional craftsman who's trying to do something different. So as a gallery or as a curator, I will not represent you. So I think they end up with a closed door there. When they try to continue what they're doing, then in the process they're not innovating. And it's a self-defeating prophecy again, because the tastes have evolved, but they are not evolving, and then they are ridiculed as craftsmen and artisans whom either we support as empathy and sympathy, but not really as viable commercial products.
What is the question?
Yeah, so what is the balance that we need to sort of drive that? One of the ways is to obviously inculcate this, get them involved with fine art institutions and the fine art world, where I think a lot of contribution can happen, and I'm glad that the bamboo product that you displayed has finally gone on auction in Christie's. I think that convergence now needs to start happening in a more tangible, open way, and there are many ways of doing that.
So, that question I still haven't figured out, but we'll get to that. I'll make one up. I think what's important when we're talking about governance and individuality and person and that interact, I think for me, I think a key ingredient is this idea of a collective consciousness, right? That exists just spatially, and I think in that exchange of that collective consciousness, and we see it all the time. So in my view, there's already a revolution taking place. I mean, if you're looking for a revolution, it's already happening as we speak, If there is a country, if there is a civilization, then this one here is demonstrated. The idea of actually, forget about self-governance. And I think the idea to take strength from that rather than wait for governance to take over what we have fundamentally, which is the idea of self-expression. Each of us, the fact that we have hands, we are all connected to the idea, we are all fundamentally craftsmen. I think it's not about how good or how bad or how weak or how strong something is. It's about the ability to be able to express whatever that is within oneself. And I think that, for me, is of an optimum value. And I think, when we're talking about this idea of this, what does it mean to be Indian? And I'm taking this also beyond the idea of, because I think it's a universal idea. It's got nothing to do with being Indian. I think it's got a lot more to do with being human. So I think that idea of measure of man, what is our measure, is something that we need to consider. That's.
Add on to that. She wants to come with that.
So I actually wanted to, piggyback a little bit. Of in terms of design thinking, and a friend of mine says this is post-traumatic design. So we basically react to things. But how can we use design thinking to actually project out into the future and say, we're going to build things that last for longer, but also change as times change or as we evolve as society?
Sure. So I'll take that, and please feel free to add on. So I think, culturally, I think coming back to the government and perhaps the lack of understanding of even the word design at that level. I think we as a culture, I think even the government has been doing a lot of jugaadu ad hoc things. And the beauty about jugaad is it's inventive, but it's short-lived and it's short-term. And so as a culture, I think we've proved today with the topics, there's a lot of wisdom in the way things were done that has lost and found itself time and again. Coming back to long-term systemic change, I think this idea of even sustainability that we think is the end-all and be-all. Sustainability to me as a word feels like a full stop. Can I say my marriage is sustainable, and would that make you happy? It's an ongoing process. It's fluid. For us, for each one of us, whether we're intervening at the government level or whatever, our daily lives, we need to understand this idea of the system and understanding the levers in the system and where, as individuals, we can actually really take hold of these levers through small and little ways sometimes to intervene. Sometimes there's low-hanging fruits and sometimes there's long-term stakes. But we can actually create change, each one of us, by doing our little bit, as Divya said. And so, I think design can be reactive, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with that, because problems are dire, problems are urgent. But there's also, it's all about long-term systemic change as well. So it depends on which side of the conversation you're on. But I think everything needs to happen together.
Yeah, but for me, I'm putting this question.
Sure.
Why is everything evaluated today with the only single objective? Commerce.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we start looking at commerce as the priority or the priori, right, what we experience in what we're calling our landscape or nature is coming from that, right? So the question that I'm asking is, so if we take commerce away, then how do we work?
Right. So, for I I think, issues that I think human beings are going through in our lives, whether it's valuable skills, whether it's education. And I actually, in my head, I understand that you know, design is not about love and fresh air. And I think that's been my personal journey from going from for-profit to non-profit. And that's the question I ask myself. If you take away what we perceive as value exchange, and go to value creation, you know, where does this leave this whole conversation?
Yeah, but you still don't extricate commerce from what you've been talking about. I'm interested in when commerce, politics, geography, all of that is taken away. How do we still remain?
I think it is the collective consciousness, right? It's about learning from each other. You know, it's about barter. I think there's a lot of value that we can kind of learn and create from amongst our society. But the core exchange is commerce today. That's the way our world goes.
Yeah, but I didn't think of commerce then.
Yeah.
So, I think the question is, you know, where do we design? I'm asking, where do we design from? What is our motivation? And if you're saying commerce, it is.
No, it's not only about it.
Yeah, so
that's all I've heard.
It's intuition, right?
No, 1 minute. All I've heard is that your motivation, yeah, I understand because again, we're putting moral judgment on how we see the world should be. Where is that lens, the viewing lens of that coming from?
I think it comes from, for me, it comes from a state of empathy. If I see a problem, you know, whether it's working with the slum next to my office and seeing that the kids are falling sick, it's coming from a place of sometimes reaction that you, as a communication designer, I'm speaking for myself, can actually fix this through a small intervention. So I'm not driven by commerce, but yeah, that's not the reality.
But I don't think, Bijoy, I don't think you can take commerce out of the equation. I think it is the triple bottom line. You must consider commerce because it is the exchange.
There was no commerce.
But they lived at a different time.
That is the origin of design. I'm saying that is the origin of time that has sustained this millennium. We still experience and take strength from that.
If I may add, yes, of course. No. So I think it's a wonderful. It's a wonderful. But it's a wonderful debate because I agree with you that, of course, without commerce, it will not be sustainable to do any business, so to speak. But I don't think the impulse necessarily comes from commerce. I mean, when I create, I never think, oh, I'll make money or we'll do well. That comes later. As you say, there are teams later on who will try and make it work and so on. But I think when you're designing or when you're thinking of something, it's for joy or it's for your internal need to, like the caveman, to put something out there. Then after that, of course, it becomes, it becomes commercial eventually. It does.
Sandeep took 3 years to do this project.
Yes. He did it from his joy.
I'm saying that commerce, just like air, water, and light, if we embrace that as something that is part of, right, then we are also free from that. Right? That's what we're looking for in design is freedom, really, at the end of the day.
That's true.
Right?
So what you're saying is, so what if it doesn't, let's say, for example, like what he said, he created something and for a long time it didn't sell. And that's okay, but it is, I mean, there's a balance, again, the whole balance thing. I think actually all the concepts that we heard today bring you to the same thing, which is balance, which is your empathy, which is a balance of commerce with empathy, with also with your long cultural heritage, as you're saying, the collective unconscious. These are all things that are impulses that make us want to create. That's what I think.
Bijoy is not satisfied. Do you have a question?
Sorry, we have to wrap actually.
Take this question. I was waiting for a voice.
Hi. I'm a student of design, though not necessarily into design. Yet I think your whole life can be designed. So I look at it from that perspective. My question is simple. How much of design is by design? And how much of design happens either intuitively, accidentally, or reactionarily?
It's just what we were saying.
For me, it's very intuitive, accidental.
Yeah.
It's about exploring and just finding an answer. So it's more about discovering while making and doing. Like you said, a lot of prototyping happens, and you keep doing till you're satisfied with what you have in your hand, and that's how it comes about. But that can be planned as.
I think most designers should have intuition. Actually, innovation only comes from intuition. It doesn't come from because your customer told you to do A, B, and C. If you listen to that, you'll actually make the wrong product. You go out to validate your intuition. That's all you're doing. You're going out in the world and researching, but you have this inner intuition of what needs to be made. And it's being shaped by your environment. It's like going and touching that dust that Bijoy's craftsmen were making, and it's shaped by that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got it. You don't know where it came from, and all of a sudden you have the answer, right? It's the aha moment, right? So it comes from within. And that's where that's where the real innovations come from. It's not because you looked at some marketing report and you followed that marketing report, and that's why we have to value validity and not just reliability.
You know, there's this lovely quote from Henry Ford. If I asked people what they wanted, they would say a faster horse, and I think that's really it. I think design is part need and part intuition. You really have to take big leaps and hunches, you know, and follow that through.
The same goes for Steve Jobs. To me, you know, he gave us things we didn't even know we wanted. And now we can't live without them. So,
to our wonderful and accomplished panel, thank you so much for being here. Yeah. Thank you to our audience for your overwhelming response. We've done design thinking talks with Sudhir actually in the past, and inspired by you and your turnout today, we're going to have another one in April, so do look out for that on avidlearning.com and our social media platforms. Have a lovely afternoon and a lovely weekend. Thank you again.